A rich woman laughed and promised marriage for perfect Chopin, but the janitor answered by quietly cleaning the piano. And that small moment began a change no one in the house could see yet. The big white house stood on a quiet street in New York, surrounded by old trees and iron gates that stayed closed most of the time. People in the area knew the house well, even if they had never stepped inside it. It was the kind of place that looked heavy with money and silence. Inside, the floors shone like mirrors. The walls held large paintings bought for more than $500,000, and every piece of furniture seemed placed with care, not for comfort but for display. This house belonged to Eleanor Wright, a woman known across America for her sharp mind, cold deals, and endless wealth. She had built her fortune through property, technology, and quiet control, and her name alone could open doors or close them forever. Eleanor stood near the black grand piano in the center of the room that evening. The piano itself was worth more than most homes, polished so well that the ceiling lights reflected on its surface. Eleanor wore a simple dark dress, though nothing about her life was simple. She was in her late 40s, tall, confident, and used to being obeyed without raising her voice. That night she was tired. A long family dinner had just ended, filled with forced smiles, empty praise, and talks about money that never truly ended. Her relatives had flown in from other American cities, eaten expensive food, and left behind noise and stress. While Eleanor stood there, a man moved quietly along the wall. His name was Michael, and he worked as a janitor in the house. He arrived early every morning and left late at night. Cleaning rooms most people never noticed unless something went wrong. He wore clean but plain clothes, pushed a small cart with cleaning tools, and kept his head down. He earned $15 an hour, enough to live but never enough to dream big, at least in the eyes of those around him. Most guests never learned his name. To them, he was part of the house, like the walls or the lights. Michael had been working in that house for over a year. He knew where every rug lay, which floorboard made noise, and which window let in cold air during winter. He had seen Eleanor angry, calm, and silent, but never weak. She rarely spoke to him, and when she did, it was short and clear. He did his job well, not because he was watched, but because he believed in doing things properly, even when no one cared. That evening, as the last family members laughed near the dining area, Eleanor looked toward the piano and felt a mix of pride and boredom. Music had once been part of her life, long ago before money took over everything. She missed that feeling but did not know how to reach it anymore. Half joking and half testing the air, she pointed toward the piano and looked at Michael. "If you can play perfect Chopin," she said with a light smile, "I'll marry you." The words fell into the room like a dropped glass. Laughter followed quickly. Her brothers laughed. Her cousins laughed. A few guests laughed too loudly, trying to stay on her good side. To them it was clearly a joke. A rich woman teasing a janitor. Nothing more. But Michael did not laugh. He stood still for a moment, holding a spray bottle in one hand. His face showed no anger and no shame. Without saying a word, he walked slowly toward the piano. The laughter faded as people watched, unsure if he had misunderstood the joke or simply ignored it. Michael reached the piano, placed his cleaning cart beside it, and took out a soft white cloth. He began cleaning the piano keys. He wiped each key slowly, carefully, as if every note mattered. His hands moved with patience, not rushing. The room grew quiet. The sound of cloth touching smooth keys replaced the noise of laughter. Michael did not look at Eleanor. He did not touch the pedals or open the lid. He simply cleaned, giving the piano the respect it deserved. Eleanor felt something shift inside her. She had expected many things. A joke back, a smile, maybe embarrassment. She did not expect silence. She did not expect dignity. That simple act felt heavier than words. It was as if Michael had answered her in a language she had forgotten how to speak. For the first time that night, Eleanor felt unsure. She watched him clean the piano, noticing details she had ignored before. The way he stood straight. The calm in his movements. The lack of need to impress. The joke she had made suddenly felt careless, even small. It landed somewhere deeper than she planned, and she could not pull it back. The guests began to drift away, sensing the moment had changed. Some returned to their drinks. Some whispered. The house, once full of sound, slowly settled into quiet again. Michael finished cleaning the keys, folded the cloth neatly, and stepped back. He nodded once, not to Eleanor directly, but to the piano itself, as if thanking it. Then he returned to his cart and continued his work, just as he had before. Eleanor remained by the piano, staring at the keys now shining brighter than ever. She did not smile. She did not speak. For the first time in years, something had surprised her without asking for money, power, or attention. And that made her uneasy in a way she could not explain. A few days passed, but the moment near the piano did not leave Eleanor's mind. It followed her through meetings, phone calls, and quiet mornings in her study. She tried to brush it away, telling herself it had meant nothing, that it was only a strange pause in an ordinary evening. Yet every time she walked past the piano, she saw the careful way Michael had cleaned the keys, as if they were alive. The silence he had left behind stayed louder than any sound the piano had ever made. Eleanor was not a woman who liked unanswered questions. Pride lived deep inside her, and curiosity lived even deeper. She needed to know if that calm act had been hiding something real, or if it had simply been good manners taken too seriously. By the end of the week, she had made a decision. She would settle the matter in her own way, in her own house, where she always felt in control. She arranged a small music match and sent out invitations. Her brothers came from Chicago, her sisters from Boston, and a few cousins drove in from nearby cities across America. She also invited 2 business partners who enjoyed classical music and never missed a chance to be close to power. The house was prepared as it always was for gatherings like this, with polished floors, soft lights, and food that cost more than $10,000 for a single evening. Everything was perfect, planned down to the smallest detail. Michael noticed the change in the house long before the guests arrived. Extra flowers appeared. Chairs were moved. The piano was opened and tuned by a professional. He did his work quietly, pushing his cart from room to room, watching without asking questions. No one told him why the piano mattered so much that night, but he could feel that something was coming. Still, he kept his head down and finished his tasks as usual. The guests arrived in the early evening, dressed in fine clothes and carrying easy smiles. They greeted Eleanor with praise and laughter, filling the house with noise once again. Drinks were poured, and soft music played in the background. The piano sat waiting in the center room, its black surface shining under the lights. Eleanor stood nearby, calm and confident, though her thoughts moved faster than she liked. When everyone had settled, Eleanor cleared her throat and spoke. She explained that the night would include a small music match, nothing serious, just something to enjoy. A few people smiled, already guessing who would win. She then introduced the first player, a young man named Victor Halle, a trained pianist who had studied music for years and performed in several halls across America. Victor wore a sharp suit and bowed politely before sitting at the piano. He played well. His fingers moved quickly and with control, filling the room with sound that was clean and correct. The guests nodded, impressed. When he finished, the room filled with applause. Eleanor smiled and clapped too. This was what she expected. Talent is shaped by lessons, money, and time. Then Eleanor turned her head slightly and looked toward the side of the room. "Michael," she said, her voice calm. "Would you like to play?" The room froze. Whispers spread like small waves. Some guests looked confused. Others looked amused. Michael paused, holding a cloth in his hand. For a moment, it seemed like he might refuse. Instead, he placed the cloth on his cart and walked forward. He did not wear a suit. His shoes were clean but plain. His face showed no fear, only focus. He sat down slowly at the piano. The bench creaked softly under his weight. He adjusted his position, placed his hands over the keys, and closed his eyes for a brief second. No one laughed this time. Something about his calm made the room hold its breath. When he began to play Chopin, everything changed. The sound was not loud, but it was full. Each note carried weight, not force. It felt as if the music came from somewhere deeper than skill alone. The room fell completely silent. Even those who did not care for music leaned forward without realizing it. The sound filled the space between the walls, moving gently, yet with strength. Eleanor felt her chest tighten. Her smile faded slowly as she listened. This was not a lucky guess or a simple trick. This was the work of years, of long nights, of practice done without praise. The music felt honest, and that honesty shook her more than any bold show ever had. When Michael finished, he lifted his hands and sat still for a moment. No one moved. Then someone began to clap, and soon the room followed. The applause was louder than before, but it felt different. It was not polite. It was real. Whispers filled the room again, this time sharper. Some guests spoke about money, wondering how such talent could be hidden. One cousin joked that this kind of skill could bring in $2 million through shows and events. Another guest spoke quietly about how strange it was that a man like this worked as a janitor. Eleanor stood frozen, her thoughts racing. She had planned this match to satisfy her pride. Instead, it had challenged it. There was no question now. She had lost the match. The room looked at her, waiting for her reaction, but Eleanor said nothing. Her eyes stayed on Michael, who had already stood and stepped away from the piano. He did not wait for praise. He did not look at her for approval. He returned calmly to his cart, just as he had done days before. And in that moment, Eleanor realized that this was no longer a game she controlled. The applause slowly faded, but the weight of the moment stayed heavy in the air. Eleanor stood near the piano, her hands resting at her sides, her posture straight but tense. She was used to rooms turning toward her, waiting for her words to settle things, to close moments cleanly and on her terms. This time felt different. The silence pressed against her ears as she felt a sharp need to take control before the room began to read her uncertainty. She lifted her chin and spoke. "It was a joke," she said, her voice clear but edged with something tight. "I never meant it seriously." A few people nodded quickly, grateful for direction. Others shifted in their seats. The match had ended, but the result sat uncomfortably between them. Eleanor went on, explaining that promises made in laughter were not real promises. She spoke with the same firm tone she used in business meetings when deals turned against her. To anyone listening closely, her words sounded strong. Inside, however, she felt exposed. Michael did not respond. He did not smile, frown, or defend himself. He simply listened, nodded once, and turned away. Without a word, he walked back to his cart, picked up his cloth, and returned to the piano. He began cleaning again, starting with the bench, then moving to the legs, and finally kneeling to wipe the floor beneath it. The cloth moved in slow circles, careful, steady. A quiet laugh escaped him, soft and brief, like a breath. It was not aimed at Eleanor or anyone else. It felt like a release, a moment shared only with himself. Still, that small sound cut through the room sharper than any argument could have. Eleanor felt it hit her. She had expected anger. She had expected disappointment, maybe even a demand. She had prepared herself to refuse requests for money or attention. Instead, she was facing calm acceptance. Michael did not ask for anything. Not money, not praise, not another chance. He behaved as if the match had never been about winning at all. The guests began to move again, unsure of their place. Some reached for drinks. Others whispered quietly, unsure what to make of the scene. The piano, once the center of attention, had returned to being an object, and Michael treated it that way, wiping away fingerprints and dust as if the music had not just shaken the room. Eleanor watched him, her chest tight. For the first time in many years, she felt small, not poor, not weak. Just small. Her wealth, her sharp words, her control over rooms like this one suddenly felt heavy and useless. This man had stood in front of her world and chosen to walk away without asking to take any part of it. She stepped forward before she could talk herself out of it. "Michael," she said, softer now. He looked up, surprised, but calm. He stood straight, cloth still in his hand. "Thank you," she said. The words tasted unfamiliar. "What you did tonight was unexpected." He nodded again, waiting, not pushing the silence. Eleanor reached into her minds, searching for something that would make sense in her world. Money always made sense. She named a number without thinking too much, the way she did when closing deals. "I'd like to offer you $50,000, she said. For the performance, a few nearby guests inhaled sharply. To them, it sounded generous, even life-changing. Michael looked at her for a moment, not shocked, not tempted. He smiled politely. "I don't need it," he said. The words landed harder than the laughter had. Eleanor blinked. "Everyone needs money," she replied before she could stop herself. "Not everyone needs more," he said gently. "I already have what I need." There was no pride in his voice, no lesson, just truth. He placed the cloth back on his cart and stepped aside, giving Eleanor space, not distance. The house felt different now, like the walls were listening. Eleanor wanted to argue, to insist, but she knew it would only cheapen the moment. For once, money could not buy closure. Michael returned to his work, moving toward the hallway, leaving the piano behind. The guests slowly began to leave, conversations quieter than before. The night ended without celebration, without speeches, without victory. When Eleanor was finally alone, the house felt too large. She walked through room after room, turning off lights, her footsteps echoing on the polished floor. She stopped in front of the piano once more. The keys were spotless. She touched one lightly, producing a single note that faded quickly into silence. That night, Eleanor did not sleep. She lay awake in her bedroom, staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening again and again. She thought about the jokes she had made so easily, the match she had arranged out of pride, and the calm refusal that had undone her more than loss ever had. She thought about the laugh, the cloth, the way Michael had chosen dignity over reward. For the first time in years, she wondered what she had given up along the way without noticing. And for the first time in just as long, she knew that this story was far from over. The weeks that followed the strange night with the piano passed more quietly than Eleanor expected. The house returned to its usual order, clean and controlled, yet something inside it had shifted. Michael continued his work as before, arriving early and leaving late, moving through the rooms with the same calm care. Eleanor noticed him more now, not because she tried to, but because her attention found him on its own. He did not change his behavior, he did not seek her out. That somehow made the space between them feel safer. Their first real conversation happened by accident. Eleanor found Michael one morning in the back garden, sweeping fallen leaves near an old stone bench. Instead of walking past, she stopped. She asked him about the bench, a simple question she already knew the answer to. He answered politely, then mentioned that the bench reminded him of an old house he once lived near in a small American town. That led to another sentence, then another. They spoke for 10 minutes, then 20, about quiet streets, aging houses, and how some places feel kinder than others. After that, small conversations became normal. They spoke in hallways, in the kitchen, sometimes sitting at the long table after the staff had left. They talked about simple things. Books, weather, music. Michael never asked her about her companies or money, and Eleanor found relief in that. For the first time in years, she could speak without weighing every word for advantage. She began to look forward to these moments, though she never admitted it to herself. They shared meals, but not the kind Eleanor was used to. No guests, no deals, no talk of profit. Sometimes it was soup, sometimes sandwiches. Food that costs less than $20, eaten slowly without hurry. Michael listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words were thoughtful but plain. Eleanor found herself laughing more, not the sharp laugh she used in meetings, but a softer one she barely recognized. Friendship grew quietly. Months passed. Seasons changed. Eleanor began spending less time chasing new deals and more time reviewing what she already had. One afternoon, she surprised even herself by selling a small business she had once fought hard to own. The money from the sale did not excite her the way it once would have. Instead, she thought of music, of hands-on piano keys, of talent hidden because no one thought to look. She decided to donate $1 million to music schools across America. It was not a public move, no press, no speeches. She asked Michael to help her choose where the money should go. They sat together with lists and notes, discussing small schools in quiet cities, places where children learned music without thinking of fame. Michael spoke carefully, never pushing his ideas, but Eleanor listened closely. She trusted him in a way she had not trusted anyone in a long time. Working together felt natural. One evening, long after the donations were finalized, Eleanor and Michael found themselves alone in the house again. The lights were dim. The city outside was quiet. They sat in the same room where everything had begun, though the piano remained closed. Eleanor looked at it briefly, then looked away. She felt calm. She spoke slowly, choosing honesty instead of strength. "I used to think everything had a price," she said. "And if it didn't, I thought it wasn't real." Michael listened, as he always did. "I was wrong," she continued. "You showed me that without trying to teach me anything." She turned to him fully then, her voice steady, her eyes clear. "I want to ask you something," she said. And this time it's not a joke. The silence between them was gentle, not heavy. She asked him to share his life with her, not as a prize, not as a promise made in laughter, but as a choice made in truth. She spoke of friendship first, of respect, of walking side by side without needing to lead or follow. Michael smiled. He said yes. There was no piano that night, no music, no applause. Just two people sitting quietly in a large house that no longer felt empty. The moment did not need witnesses or words beyond that simple answer. Later, when the lights were turned off and the house rested in silence, Eleanor realized something she had never understood before. Power did not come from control. Wealth did not come from numbers. The most honest things in life arrived without force and stayed without fear. A careless laugh had started it all. And patience, dignity, and friendship had finished the story in a way money never could.